Cambridge. Welcome to What's That About, where we answer all your questions about the pressing issues of the day, brought to you by CCTV.
CCTV, we tell you what to think, so you don't have to.
We don't do that, Max.
Of course, we would never do that, folks. Our first question comes from Paul on Newman Street. Paul asks, since a certain counselor decided to step down at the end of the term, there's going to be at least one new candidate elect this year, but there's like 12 new candidates running. I mean, how can a voter decide?
Paul is right. There are 9 slots in the Cambridge City Council, but only 8 returning incumbents after Paul Toner decided not to run. Of course, being an incumbent is no guarantee of re-election in Cambridge, so it's possible we'll seat several new people on the council this year.
That's right, Paul. There's 11 official challenger candidates, so it's a lot to keep track of. But lucky for you, we interviewed almost all of them for What's That About special 2025 election preview.
That's right. Over the past couple of weeks, we've tried to interview all of the non-incumbent candidates.
The only ones we haven't done are Robert Winters, who we are not going to interview because I'm not interested in having a conversation with someone who likes to tweet the times of Cambridge Library's drag time story hour readings to libs of TikTok, and Tim Flaherty, who we were initially scheduled to interview, but then he canceled last minute due to a work obligation and does not seem to be interested in rescheduling.
We don't know Mr. Flaherty's schedule or motivations, but it's worth pointing out that he only canceled after we sent him a question list, including one question asking about his guilty plea and disbarment for witness tampering.
That's probably just a coincidence. It's also probably just a coincidence that as attorney for brothel enthusiast Paul Toner, he advised the counselor not to step down during his term, which just coincidentally left an open seat for Mr. Flaherty to run for during this election. And it's probably just a coincidence that Counselor Toner donated $500 to Tim Flaherty's campaign.
Probably, but let's just embrace the mystery.
Okay.
In any case, we've got interviews of 9 of the 11 challengers up on YouTube. If you search for hashtag What's That About, hashtag Cambridge MA, the playlist should come up first. Unless that other What's That About in Bangladesh is juking stats again.
Ugh, I hate that What's That About from Bangladesh. Each interview has hot links in the description for separate questions, so you don't have to watch the whole video if you only want to hear what they have to say, for example, about their favorite part of Cambridge. Although I don't know why you wouldn't want to watch my amazing interviewing skills. They're riveting.
Riveting. Anyways, let's get to some of the highlights. This first episode of the week, we will focus on the candidates' answers to questions on 2 of the major issues of this campaign, housing and bike lanes.
So we're going to do like a show type thing?
Yeah, Max, we talked about this.
Oh yeah, a clip show type thing. Let's start with housing. We asked the candidates how they felt about the council's recently passed multifamily zoning regs and other regulations intended to spur new housing, like getting rid of parking minimums. Answers run the gamut from Ned Melanson's full-throated backing of the new council regulations to Elizabeth Bizzia's rejection of the multifamily zoning legislation to Al-Zubi's response, where she tries to voice a different perspective outside of what she calls the YIMBY-NIMBY dichotomy.
I want to see more housing built in Cambridge of all kinds, whether that's affordable or subsidized, public, social housing, and even market rate housing, I think, plays a role in solving the housing crisis. So I definitely want to be part of a pro-housing coalition on the city council. The city council, passed the multifamily housing 8-1 in February. And prior to that, they'd passed the affordable housing overlay and the affordable housing overlay amendments. So
Right.
some really progressive pro-housing legislation has been enacted in the last few years, and now it's time to operationalize and to execute on that legislation. So now comes the really important piece. Like it was really hard just to get that passed, and now comes like, okay, we made national news. Cambridge is all over the housing circles and progressive media and that sort of thing, and even more mainstream media outlets. And now it's time to actually execute, and it's time to build the housing and put roofs over people's heads, and to do so in a way that's sustainable and makes sense, especially near transit and those sort of things.
Yeah, look, I think it's absolutely shameful how working class people, longtime residents in the city, are being neglected and are frankly not being given the opportunity to continue to stay and support themselves here. And so I support the affordable housing overlay. I want to make sure that we're building as much 100% affordable housing as possible. And my preference is that any housing built in Cambridge at this point provides as many affordable units as possible.
Mhm.
And ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, are just great. They're great for landlords and owners that can make some passive income, while great for renters that have additional places that they can live, often at a lower rate than let's say a new apartment going up. Now, as far as exclusionary zoning and how it was erased through the upzoning, I do think this is a little bit more of a nuanced conversation. Exclusionary zoning was terrible. It was horrible because it was explicitly set up to segregate neighborhoods. And importantly, just because something has racist or classist roots doesn't necessarily mean that the solution to it is necessarily less classist or racist, or the specific solution that's chosen, much less anti-racist. And in this case, I worry about folks who are going to be displaced from a lot of the units that are going to be sold and developed into this new privately built housing. There's now movement to actually lower the inclusionary unit requirements. That is the number of units in the building, the percentage of units in the building that have to be affordable,
Mhm.
from 20% to 10%. That's something the city's studying. And there's a lot of folks that are arguing to move it to 0%. And if that's the case, it's very hard to see. I've yet to see anyone explain how this would even happen, how low-income folks are going to find more affordable units, the same um, price range and the same quality of units in the next several years, when we all know that newly built units generally cost more per square foot than older units. So folks that are living in what's called, I think, inappropriately, naturally occurring affordable housing, because it's not affordable. It just happens to be older and therefore slightly cheaper than the new buildings. Those folks would still have to pay more for units of the same size, unless we kept the inclusionary requirement. So I think this is a little bit of it's a significantly nuanced conversation. I do think building more housing across the entire region is absolutely necessary. We absolutely have a housing crisis. And I do think that the upzoning is really aimed at solving housing issues for people in the middle and upper middle class, people like me. It's not focused, and this is where I have a problem with some of the rhetoric around it. It is not focused on addressing um, the housing shortages for folks that are making below $57,000. It's explicitly not focused on those folks because those folks can't even qualify for an inclusionary unit.
I am concerned about the upzoning bill that got passed recently. I think the intention is good. The truth is, like you mentioned, rent, housing price, they're all up. And so we need to build more. I agree with that. How we go about that is, I think, what many of us have differences in opinions about. And I don't have a magic middle ground for everyone, like the golden ratio or anything like that. I don't. But I think it is important to listen to all voices and try to come up with a middle ground that might not be happy for everyone, but it is the most balanced compromise. I am concerned about the upzoning bill, and in certain aspects of I know people talk about setbacks and stuff like that. I am concerned about the effect of this upzoning bill. The multifamily upzoning thing, I think it's good intention, but I would just share my vision concisely. I think along the major arteries of Cambridge, we should build big and tall. Obviously, we have to be safe. As long as it's safe, we should build big and tall. In established neighborhoods, I don't necessarily mind going up to accommodate more. I do think that there should be some kind of review process.
I am a fan of the recent ordinance that makes it possible to build multifamily housing across the city by right. I think that's really, really important. When people talk about government waste and systemic barriers to getting very much needed progress, I think one emblematic example of that is the processes by which we build homes. I think those processes should not be as long and drawn out. It should not be such a burden to provide this essential good for people. Imagine if the same thing happened if we, for farming every new piece of food. I mean, that would be crazy. Shelter is one of these fundamental human needs. So, yes, simplifying those processes is high priority.
So I assume you supported the affordable housing overlay, the removing parking minimums, the legalizing ADUs, the upzoning that just passed. Are there other changes, or what else would you like to see done with our housing laws to improve, the housing situation?
Sure. So I think that there are a few other laws that present certain outdated barriers to providing safe and very much needed housing. So one of them is to legalize mid-rise single stair housing in Massachusetts, which would basically eliminate some of these really outdated barriers that at a very different time in history were really meant for safety. But at this point, and there's been very rigorous research into this, it does not do that. It does not improve the safety of the community, but it does increase the construction costs of many new houses by up to 25%, which is absolutely ridiculous. So going back and eliminating some of these unneeded barriers, I think, is also important.
I personally am a very strong supporter of ADUs. I think that if somebody has a garage that they want to change and make it a place where their parent can stay or their child can stay, and they want to make sure that they're close to home, I think that's great. And I really don't think anyone should be stopping that, including zoning laws. I think that's really important that we add those housing units to our community. As far as something like parking minimums go, I do think that the 1-to-1 ratio that we had was problematic, but I also think that the removal had issues that people didn't necessarily fully think out. One of the issues being, if there's a parking lot, there needs to be a handicap spot, and or if it's of a certain size, right, for these bigger developments. And by removing the parking minimum, it also removes the requirement to have a handicap spot. I unfortunately recently had my mother pass of cancer. She was in a 2.5-year battle, and the last 8 months of her life, she was completely wheelchair bound. Her question wasn't, okay, the event that you guys are doing, where is it? What is it? Because she just wanted to spend time with us. But it was questions about, is it accessible? Is it somewhere that I'll be able to get dropped off, and all of those concerns. And I'm worried about these new developments that they're not going to have a handicap spot. Yeah, so that's something that I'm concerned about. And I think those are some of the effects that weren't fully thought out. When it comes to affordable housing, for the most part, I'm very supportive of it. When it comes to the overlay as a whole, the reason that it was passed, they said they wanted it to go taller so that nonprofits could afford to buy it and compete price point wise with market rate housing. I think Mark McGovern's the one who said that when he was one of the strong advocates for it. I think that the new zoning, it kind of takes away that benefit, because now everyone's allowed to build that tall. So market rate development is going to buy those properties that could have been bought by nonprofits trying to do affordable housing, and now they're going to buy it and have for-profit buildings, market rate buildings. And I think one of the saving graces, though, is that there's a 20% affordable component for all of those developments. I think it's over 9 units, 10,000 square feet, or over 4 stories. But I know there's a movement to decrease that. So I looked at other cities and how they're dealing with it right now. The race in Boston, Mayor Wu, she's very supportive of keeping it at that 20%. Josh Kraft supports bringing it down to 13%. I'm a true believer that in order to justify this, we need to keep it at that 20%, and moving it down would really hurt the overall mission of having like more affordable housing. So for me, it's not just the zoning, it's also what the impact is going to have. And is the impact really going to create affordable housing for young people that are trying to find a home? Is it going to create accessible housing for people that are trying to stay living in Cambridge and have different mobility needs? So I think that we need to see things holistically. And I'm worried a little bit about the current zoning, that it didn't really have all of those effects considered.
So I think a lot of what's been done as far as I think ADUs make sense. I think that, but I think that one size fits all zoning, and you can plop a tall building anywhere in the city is without any parking is kind of abusive. And I think that there has to be some differentiation because the neighborhoods are very different, right? So if you go to Kendall Square, it's tall. Central Square is sort of tall. If you go out to the Highlands, it's not quite as tall, and people have yards and other things. So it's not it's reasonable. It's not unreasonable to want to maintain some consistency in your neighborhood, to worry about traffic and other things. I looking at the AHO going in. They're trying to put it in on Mass Ave and Walden.
Yeah, no
And
personal.
there's going to be no parking and no pullover. And you look at that and you go, well, there's no place for all those Amazon trucks to go. Where are they going to go? And at the same time, they're changing the Mass Ave into a single travel lane in each direction. So there will be no place to turn over except to stop in the middle of the street. So I think that, neighborhoods and areas have different traffic patterns, they have different density, and I think we should treat them and take that into consideration in the zoning. I also think that the zoning doesn't take into account the other attributes of what's going on here. So, what about open space? Are we going to have a park for the kids to play on the swing set? Are we going to choke traffic off and double the density of an area? Utilities, schools, I guess, are falling in population right now for whatever reason, but schools might be okay. But are we really looking at this and saying, okay, as far as the total experience and livability of an area of the city, are we really looking at it as a whole versus just zoning?
There's been a couple there's the upzoning, which it sounds like you don't support the citywide 4 stories allowable and 6 stories with 20% affordable housing. I don't want to put words in your mouth. That sounds like you don't support that.
Yeah, I think that it's going to have unintended consequences. I think that, first of all, I don't think that inclusionary hasn't proven to be attractive and financeable. So I think I looked at the affordable housing inventory between 2003 and 2004. And I think there was only 2 neighborhoods that had any inclusionary housing permitted. The data that was quoted by the Globe says, and they were seeing the same thing in San Francisco and other cities, is that the amount of inclusionary housing, if you're up in the 20% range, is difficult to finance, and it really crushes multifamily housing. So what you might end up with is just a bunch of market rate 9-unit buildings all over the city, and the market rate will basically be more expensive than what was there before.
Yeah, so as the law is written, I do not, because I actually think it was inadequate, especially compared to some of the policies it was based on. Like if you look at Minneapolis and New York, they actually had much more robust guidelines for design review. They actually did not take away parking minimums completely. It was based on transit access. So I would have liked to have seen more of that being put into the policy rather than kind of a blanket, like anything goes and relying on market forces, which like it's a choice.
Mhm.
And like there is benefit in removing roadblocks to kind of not let process get in the way of progress, but it's highly reliant on kind of the market balancing that. And so I just for the city like don't necessarily trust the market that much, and so would like to see more of those kind of guardrails put into place, like setbacks to protect solar and green space.
Any advocate for housing, anybody, the goal of any organization, any community should be getting home ownership. And so I think that's the main priority of the city of Cambridge, or any city in particular, should be raising the rates of home ownership for families at all. So, but again, we also want to increase affordable housing for families as well.
We did make some progress with the multifamily zoning.
Mhm.
I do want to be mindful, though, that my approach to housing, our platform is centered essentially around bringing a nuance to the table that we don't see in the housing conversation.
Okay.
Because a part of what we see with deregulation and the upzoning that could potentially lead to risk is conversations on gentrification and what it means for low-income communities who the land prices could go up and kick those community members out if they can't afford to live there. But on the other side, I want to be able to push back against conversations around how we envision what our city looks like in
Mhm.
terms of building more housing, because I do believe we need more housing. I just am central to focusing on deeply permanent affordable housing, which leans on city resources and the government to be able to ensure that that housing stays affordable. So the zoning in that sense is kind of like a case by case basis in how we explore certain demolitions that are happening in the city. And then the other piece is drawing on the environmental concern.
Mhm.
So I'd want to be able to explore what it would mean to making sure that, for example, people who have solar panels, like what are ways we can address development that happens to make sure people who have solar panels on their homes aren't essentially stifled in their ability to be able to engage in sustainability practices.
Mhm.
So working on ways to work with the two of those.
I saw on your website you talk about breaking the YIMBY NIMBY binary. Can you go into a little more depth about what you mean by that?
There's this side to the YIMBY approach that, again, like sometimes neglects some of the voices that I believe are center to how we address housing, because my philosophy is when we help the most vulnerable, it only uplifts all of us.
Mhm.
So in that way, I have a desire to be intentional about our housing and making sure that people don't get kicked out.
Mhm.
So they don't get priced out. So taking on an anti-displacement approach to housing, being conscientious of, yes, it's great that we're moving forward with being able to build more housing, but we also need to be intentional about what kind of housing we build and who gets left out of the conversation. Because at the end of the day, who are we building the city for?
Mhm.
On the other side is the NIMBY side, and it's essentially characterized by a group of people who don't really believe in building more housing.
Mhm.
But from the NIMBY side, I want to be able to push on more housing, and especially in terms of how we navigate issues like homelessness and making sure we can explore social housing and other nonprofit work, but being able to push back on making sure that folks understand we do need more housing. Like we do have a housing shortage.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of for whom and how do we build it.
Great, now let's hit another hot button issue. We asked the candidates how they felt about the Cycling Safety Ordinance, or CSO, and the city's commitment to Vision Zero, or zero traffic fatalities. This time we'll start with John Hanratty's opinion that the CSO was poorly conceived, and end with Dana Bullister's radically opposite position.
The cycling safety ordinance is another one. For instance, the cycling safety ordinance, only requirement is to build 26 miles of bike lanes.
Mhm.
And it has one design for every part of the city, no matter how dense and what traffic patterns they have. And they're going to put them in there, and they never even considered the side effects of putting those bike lanes in. So that it doesn't have a set of goals. What's the goal? Well, the goal is, I would think, is to reduce accidents and to make biking safer. And if we were to do that, we should measure to say, are we actually obtaining that and making that happen? Are we increasing bicycle usage in the city because of these bike lanes? Those are meaningful goals that you really should be measuring to see what happens.
So I want to see the Cambridge cycling safety ordinance completed. I know they've already started to make changes to Main Street. I want to see the changes that were planned for Broadway enacted. So I want to see that the CSO number 1 completed, as hopefully as fast as possible, no more delays. And then I want to see, and the great thing about the CSO is that it was planned out, and it was there were a lot of professionals involved. There was public input. It was planned and then done, piece by piece. And so I want to see CSO2, planned, studied, and then executed on while I'm in office. And I would hope to lead that. So I think there's a lot of progress that's been made in cycling safety, but I think there's a lot of progress that can be made. Let's just say, like, trying to go like south to north in Cambridge, or north to south. There's not many protected bike lanes, so it's hard to get to Somerville, for instance, on a protected path. And our cities it's hard to get to Boston in some ways. So these cities are so connected economically and culturally, and we need to make the transportation network reflect that.
I also support the CBS and in the cycling ordinance in general. I think the principle is there, and I not that this should matter, but I am also being endorsed by CBS. So I bike. I bike to work every day, rain or snow. Although I hate it when it rains more than snow, to be very fair. When I bike, I have a raincoat when I go to work. Most of the time I bike to door knock. I bike to most places around Cambridge, or even in Boston where I work. So I am all for safe bike lanes. Having said that, I don't think we're going to be able to have, because I do have a lot of cyclist friends and we talk all the time. I don't think we're going to be able to have a bike lane on every single Cambridge street. I don't think that's going to be feasible. But I think on major arteries, I think on major roads, east, south, and I think we really need to focus on north. I said east, west. I think we really need to focus more on north, south, to be very fair. I think as long as we have the road is from a public, so I want to emphasize something. I'm not very ideologically driven. As long as it's evidence-based from a public health standpoint, I would support. So for me, if the road is wide enough, I support building safe bike lanes, because I think having those bike lanes would be safer, not just for cyclists, but also for car drivers and also pedestrians. So my view on bike lanes is that generally, if the road is wide enough, and if we have all the things done correctly, I support.
Don't bike very often, but my girlfriend bikes. She's a very strong believer in biking, and I want to make sure that it's safe for everyone. I do have some concerns about the ordinance. One of them being the budgeting process behind it. For me, I feel like whenever you're voting on something, bringing it forward, it should be really clear how much it's going to cost. This isn't just about, bike lanes. This is about, generally speaking, the city shouldn't be moving forward on things before they have a real understanding of how much it's going to cost. And so I do think that it's important. As far as Vision Zero, making sure that nobody dies, is it realistic that there's going to be no traffic deaths? In terms of like my lifetime, I don't think so. In terms of a year, I think that's absolutely a possible goal. And that should be what we're striving for. So I think we should be looking at data. I think something that stands out to me is safer intersections. We have a lot of issues there and we should be addressing those. And even though I don't know if, it's possible, it definitely should be our goal.
I feel like the bike lane network, so I definitely am in support of Vision Zero, but I don't necessarily think that miles of bike lanes is a good metric. And so again, this is where, like, coming back to talking about metrics of success, Vision Zero is zero fatalities, where in even the data put out by the Bicycle Safety Commission is that 40% of fatalities happen mid-route. So that's where that would be affected by bike lanes, but 60% happen in intersections. So what I would really like to see is more emphasis being put on intersection design, because that's where we are still seeing fatalities rather than just like miles of bike lane being a metric, because that really is only addressing 40% of the problem. And depending on when we're seeing hot spots, and there might be specific routes that are more dangerous than others, like miles is easy to measure, but it's not necessarily a true measurement of success. And so as far as like moving towards Vision Zero, so that's where kind of what we put in, it's kind of, I want to say like it's a little bit half-assed.
Really got to get the community involved in a lot of things that are happening. There have been fatalities that have occurred because of these busy intersections, as well as people who do not abide by the speed limit. And you have right now, the school semester is about to start in less than 2 weeks. On top of that, preschoolers and families are also going to be involved. As well as, of course, there's another issue with the bicycle ordinance. The bicycle ordinance, of course, is homeowners, they want their parking. And so that's another issue when you have people in the suburbs in Cambridge, in the middle between the Cambridge center area, where homeowners, they need their parking, but they also have to rely on bicyclists who, majority of them are, commuters, as well as, of course, college students. And so they rely on their bicycles, they rely on their scooters, but people also need room for parking. And so there's a lot of issues that the city and, of course, these communities have to deal with, regulating and finding a balance in between.
Pedestrians or drivers are navigating a tricky road situation where some bikers don't respect the rules of the road, and we need to create a culture around how we can all be mindful of each other when we're using the road as a shared space. So I definitely want to push for bike lanes and have a commitment to making sure there are safety measures put in place, the biggest being a separation of the road and the bike lanes, but also making sure pedestrians are able to have designated crosswalks at dangerous intersections. Like I'm thinking DeWolf Street in Mount Auburn, for example. I know this, I'm familiar with it because of the Harvard community. It's a pretty dangerous intersection. So making sure we also use other tools to ensure the safety of other people on the road as well is something that I'd want to work on. I definitely want to also be working in conjunction on the state level in terms of state legislators and also the MBTA administration and staff on how we can increase our access and be an advocate from the city council side on how we can do that.
Great. So it sounds like you support the cycling safety ordinance, finishing that part of the bike lane network.
Correct.
Completely support the ordinance. I'm optimistic about Vision Zero. I think it's better and safer for everyone, including cars, especially cars, to have protected bike lanes rather than, frankly, cyclists weaving in and out of traffic in front of cars. I think this is something that both drivers and cyclists can and should get behind. I think, though, there's a lot that we can do to make sure that there's greater education, to make sure that folks that are, maybe unsure of how to operate around bicycle lanes, have some guidance, and also that we do some traffic enforcement. I think that one of the things that I hear from folks that are trying their absolute level best to not hit cyclists and to be safe on the roads, especially a lot of our elderly neighbors that are, trying really hard to drive safely, is that, they see a lot of they see lapses in enforcement of cyclists, going through whether it's red lights or stop signs. And even if it's completely safe, it still causes a level of uncertainty and anxiety for folks that makes them get anxious while driving and uncertain about what's going to happen on the road, and therefore perhaps themselves act in a way that's not safe as a driver. And so obviously we know that cars violate traffic laws all the time. Pedestrians do as well. I'm guilty of this as well, and so do cyclists. And so across all methods of transportation, really to increase safety, we have to increase enforcement of some of our rules, because I think that's going to make everyone safer, in addition to making sure that we have our protected bike lanes.
I am a big proponent of separated bike lanes. They save lives. That is objective fact right there. And it would be outstanding if more of my commute, part of which is in Cambridge, part of which is in Boston, would include more separated bike lanes. Everyone's happier when there's separated bike lanes, who's on the road in that moment. The bikers are happier. The folks in vehicles who are using the road are much happier. And so it would be much safer if we had more separated lanes.
Okay. And so you support finishing the cycling safety ordinance and completing that part of the bike lane network?
Absolutely, 100%. I think that we should be a leader in these bike lanes, not just for the folks who use them right now, but to allow more folks to use these bike lanes. There are people who, there are families, there are commuters who very much want to use these lanes. In fact, sometimes I am hanging out in my lab and people will ask, well, how'd you get here? And I say, well, I biked. They're like, really? Is that safe? Are you sure? I mean, I don't know. I'm not comfortable going all the way. What's your route exactly? Oh my goodness, you're going on that bridge? How could you do that? I was like, well, it's not that bad. They're like, well, I would absolutely take that route if it were a little bit safer. And so I think it would be amazing to fully implement that network to allow more people to feel they can use it and to lessen traffic on the roads. So both those reasons I think are vital.
That's great. Housing and bike lanes, the two only things that matter in Cambridge. And remember, you can go to CCTV or the show YouTube playlist to get candidates' full answers on housing and bike lanes, not just these snippets we showed you today. For the most part, they were very thoughtful.
Not like you, Max.
This is true. I'm more of the fun-loving, off-the-cuff, say whatever comes into his head guy. Squirrel!
Speaking of squirrels, we asked candidates about everything from how they came to Cambridge and why they're running for council to how they would work to improve cultural life in the city and reduce commercial vacancies in Central Square.
Which you can see online or on CCTV. But on the next episode, we'll highlight some of the candidates' more interesting or unique answers that don't involve bikes or zoning. This has been the 2025 election preview.
And don't forget to vote this November. Until next week,
We'll see you first.